here's Canada and Mexico. They're our next door neighbors. They're our two largest trading partners. Anything that you do to Canada or Mexico because of that linkage, you are also going to do directly or indirectly to the U.S. You shoot either one of those two countries in the foot, you better check your own boot for blood because it's going to be there.
Educate, inform, inspire. The Dan Parsons Show, a podcast that lifts up instead of tearing down.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Dan Parsons Show. I'm your host, Dan Parsons. Coming up on today's show, we're diving into President Trump's trade war with John Hansen, president of the Nebraska Farmers Union. John served as a U.S. trade advisor for 3 presidents. So Mr. Hansen knows a thing or two about international trade. Here's my conversation with John Hansen. Enjoy. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome back to the Dan Parsons Show, Mr. John Hansen. John, welcome back to the Dan Parsons Show.
Well, thanks for asking me. It's always I always enjoy these interviews.
Yeah, John. Just for our listeners and viewers, John's a longtime president of the Nebraska Farmers Union. We'll get into some of the other qualifications of why I asked John to jump on the pod this morning, because we're going to talk about the trade war and tariffs. But, John, you were on, I think, the radio show at least once, and you were on the first alliteration of this podcast back when we used to drink beer on the podcast, yes. Pints and Politics. But this is your official unveiling on the new Dan Parsons Show podcast. So thanks for taking time.
Great. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, we are going to talk about tariffs and the trade war, but, I'm asking all of my guests, John, and even though you've been on before, you haven't had these questions, just 4 get to know you questions. And so kind of quick fire, and then you get to fire one back at me. So if you're ready, let's do these. Question number 1, where did you grow up?
Assuming that I have, in fact, grown up, my formative years were on the family farm, 11.5 miles northwest of Newman Grove. We're a 6th-generation homesteader family. And so our relatives homesteaded about 5 miles from the farm I grew up on.
Nice. Question number 2, this will be fascinating. What was your dream job when you were a kid?
Oh, I always wanted to be a farmer. I love livestock. I always wanted to raise hogs and cattle and horses and chickens and all those things. I spent my young years doing chores and liked it a lot.
Nice. This may be a complicated answer. You may have to think about this a little bit. Who is the most famous person you've ever met?
Well, let's see. If I were to break it down into categories, I would say the most famous political person that I've ever met would be Presidents Clinton, Obama, and Biden.
Nice. Well, but there are some musicians in that batch too, I suspect.
So if I'm moving on to entertainers, it would have to be Willie Nelson, Neil Young, John Mellencamp, and Mary Chapin Carpenter.
Oh, man, I know. Yeah. Farm Aid too, right? Maybe several Farm Aids.
Lots of Farm Aids.
Yeah.
And also other things that we've done with Willie and other things we've done with Mellencamp and any recent things we've done with Neil. Yes.
Oh, man. Yeah. Very, very cool. Okay. Speaking of music,
I'm not done yet with my famous person.
Okay. Keep going.
So if I think about sports figures, I think the most famous sports person I've ever met and got to spend good time with was Bill Russell. Nice. And just kind of the at-large most famous person who was said to be one of the most well-known people in America when I was growing up was Dr. Ben Spock.
Oh yeah, Dr. Spock. Wow. What was the setting that you met Dr. Spock?
He was running on a third-party political ticket, the People's Party. Huh. And, so I was helping him in Nebraska, and we got to spend a lot of time together and know each other fairly well, and maintain the relationship after that.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I knew that would be complicated because you've met a lot of
Yes.
people. So thanks for
Of course,
breaking it down.
and of course, Dan Parsons. But
Well, yeah. Well, we all have our crosses to bear. So, the very first concert that you attended.
well, I'm not really sure, but one of the more memorable ones, the first ones that I can remember, was Chicago when it played at the UNL Coliseum, and they pretty much blew the joint out. They just the sound was just wow. The horns in that facility was just amazing.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, you're one question back to me.
So, where were you born and mostly raised?
Well, I was born here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and grew up in and around Lincoln before my family moved out west to Ogallala about middle school age. So I spent middle school and high school years in Ogallala before coming back to Lincoln to attend the university, and been stuck here ever since. So I tell people, John, and I know you can relate to this, those handful of years I spent in Western Nebraska have really helped my career and my perspective of what this state is about. Because as you know, you get past West O and things change a little bit here in the state. So I was very fortunate to have those years out in Ogallala in Western Nebraska. So, yeah. John, just to brag on you a little bit, you served on the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Nebraska State Technical Committee, the board of the Nebraska Farm Crisis Council, the board of the Coalition for Prosperous America. In other words, you've done and seen a lot in your career in this state pertaining to agriculture. And so I just wanted to get your take here this morning on what's going on with the global trade war and what's going on with the markets reacting to what President Trump is doing. And so I even believe, I think you told me once that you were a U.S. trade advisor. So maybe fill in a little bit of what I didn't get right and why you have an interest and some expertise pertaining to trade.
So I was appointed by President Clinton twice and President George W. Bush twice, and then served for an amount of time in the Obama administration as a U.S. TR, U.S. Trade Representative, USDA, top security clearance rated trade advisor. So that was 14 years. And so I was able to get to know all of the primary players and, of course, the heads of USTR, and also just familiar with the process and the thinking of how it is we develop trade policy and how we implemented it and all of those things. I had been working on trade policy since the mid-1980s because the relationship between our trade policy and our economic policy / farm policy in the U.S. were so closely linked. And yet it was beyond the reach or involvement of most people who were impacted by it. So we had this sort of invisible farm policy that was tied to our trade policy that we didn't even really talk about out loud in a lot of cases. And so we saw the tools that we used in our farm policy toolbox, restricted, and a lot of the more basic things that we've used historically to make farm programs work in a better fashion, more cost-effective fashion, and a better economic fashion for family farmers and ranchers, taken away from us through the WTO, because the WTO was clearly dominated by the international grain trade and their idea of anything that caused grain prices or raw material prices to go up was trade distorting, and everything that caused prices to go down to farmers was, well, just good business. And so you saw this really heavy hand of the cartel on trade policy. And so in my experience as a trade advisor, there was this constant kind of conflict between are we representing U.S. interests, or are we representing U.S. companies headquartered in the United States interests? But they clearly had the hand on the steering wheel of trade policy.
So fast forward to today, and of course, Donald Trump has been talking about tariffs for decades, and now that he has reclaimed the White House, he's implementing those thoughts and notions about trade, and so the markets are responding to that in just the last few days. We've seen global markets in disarray. The U.S. market continues to tumble even this morning. So, help us make sense of this, John. What do you believe the president is trying to accomplish, and then maybe we can go from there.
Well, I think that the president is trying to completely reset the international rules of engagement for trade, and so it's a very ambitious undertaking, but he's going at it in a very ambitious way, and so it's one of my friends that I've done trade policy with for a long time. We visited last week, and she said that the way that he's going at things will give tariffs a bad name, because the folks who work in this policy arena, if you look at tariff as a tool, it's a valuable tool in the toolbox, which has also been my position for a long time. It's that it needs to stay in the toolbox and can be used to help offset inequities in the marketplace where things are out of whack. And so the use of the tools is so critical. And the example I use is the hammer. A hammer can help build your house and drive nails and do all kinds of good things that need to be done to construct things and build things. Or you can use it to break windows. It all comes down to how do you use the tool. So how you use the tool matters. And so what has been lacking, in my view, is that the partners, the people who are actually impacted by all these things, have not really been consulted. They have not been included in the decision making. So when a lot of people say, there is no plan, there's a plan. It's just not a plan that's been widely shared or developed in any kind of an open or transparent way. So process matters. And as you know, if you've been around, you've done public policy anytime for a long time, then you know that process is critical to having a better a policy outcome. It's better to having more inclusion and more buy-in on the outcome of the conclusion. And so process really matters. And so the Trump administration is obviously off to reset world trade policy, but they're doing it without really kind of the involvement that is needed, I think, to have a reset.
John, I'm going to play this clip from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who says that tariffs are here to stay, and let's comment on this.
Take it anymore, and that's his model.
And that was abundantly clear during the presidential campaign how much the president truly believes in tariffs and putting him at the center of his economic policy. But you saw absolute panic in the global markets. Did you expect that, or were you surprised?
No, I think the point is you need to reset the power of the United States of America and reset it against all our allies and our enemies alike. The idea that all the countries of the world can run trade surpluses with America and buy our things with us. Remember, $1.2 trillion. In 1980, we were a net investor, meaning we owned more of the rest of the world than they owned of us.
Yeah, it's a different world. It's a different market.
Now, just comment on that, John, as far as resetting the power of agriculture. And the host there the reporter was challenging the secretary of, well, those days have long gone. So just your thoughts on that.
Well, in that back and forth that went on, which I did watch yesterday, it was just like, check my blood pressure medicine out right early, first thing in the morning, see whether or not it's still working, is that when she asked him the question about whether or not he was aware of efforts on the part of the administration to do market facilitation payments to farmers for their lost market value, He said he wasn't aware of any of those discussions. And so, again, how you do things really matters. And so we in agriculture are extremely susceptible to retaliation. And so when you do things in a fashion that is likely to cause a lot of retaliation, it makes us very nervous, because what history has showed us relative to all these things is that agriculture is really the most vulnerable, or one of the most vulnerable sectors of our total economy. We have a bunch of excess production that needs to go somewhere, that needs to get exported, that needs to get used. We produce more hogs, more soybeans, more cattle than we can consume. So there's a lot of these commodities that really do depend on an export market, and if you really do damage to that export market, you do damage not just to the part that gets exported, but you do damage to the entire marketplace, because we're so concentrated. So as I have been saying, when these things happen, it's agriculture's nose that bleeds first, bleeds worst, and bleeds longest. And so right now, agriculture is in the third year of really struggling to be able to cash flow, and we've had to substitute a lot of our equity for earned income that we didn't get in the marketplace. And so we've been taking on more and more debt as our equity has been turning into debt. And so this is the third year in a row of doing that. So we're in an extremely vulnerable position. So when you look at what the impact of all of this could be in agriculture, it's huge.
Yeah, and maybe, John, talk a little bit. That's really good. Talk a little bit, John, about the impact specifically on Nebraska agriculture, because again, the message I keep hearing is the uncertainty is what's most concerning. So maybe talk a little bit about the immediate and long-term impacts on Nebraska agriculture.
Well, so we're somewhere around 30% of all of the crops we grow need to be exported, and in order to find a home for them with our current production system. And so I think we're at the top of the heap relative to beef exports, soybean exports. We're right at the top. So as states go that depend on exports, we're one of the heavy duty states that will be heavily impacted. And so we're number 4 in ag production and receipts overall. But we're in a world market. Things have changed in agriculture, where we're no longer just the dominant agricultural producer. China has geared up. They actually produce more total agricultural products than we do. We're seeing tremendous competition from both production and cost relative to the development of a lot of new production acres in Argentina, Brazil. And those guys are becoming heavy hitters. And so all of these things are add up, and especially if you've been in market development efforts, it takes a long time to develop a steady, dependable market relationship. It takes hardly any time at all to blow it up.
Yeah.
So what we found in Trump 1.0 was the loss of the Chinese market is the cost that we're continuing to pay, right? So we had $27 billion worth of marketplace value lost, as was calculated. We got reimbursed for $23 billion. The way we got reimbursed was really problematic. We didn't follow the normal payment limits procedure in USDA. We didn't have the oversight. We obviously paid a lot of money to folks that should not have gotten those kinds of payments. So there's a lot of problems around that. So because of the broad-based nature of these kinds of tariffs, then the damage that we can do to agriculture this time around would be substantially larger. And we've just had 3 different deadlines for a farm bill be extended, and so we're extended again until September 30th again this year. So here we are, just one more kick the can down the road, because we can't come up with the money to fund an updated farm bill with better income safety net and updated programs, sport, and all of those things. And so we're looking at a farm bill that was written in 2018 that we're still using, and yet our ag inputs and all the other things that we're doing have gone up. So the income safety net is not effective right now. It's not keeping folks in business. And so if we can't come up with money to fund the farm bill, we're going to all of a sudden come up with the money to fund payment, a market facilitation payments. I'm not sure that that's in the cards. And if it's not in the cards, the marketplace value that you lose is the short term. The loss of the market itself is the long term, which is why National Farmers Union went with the largest ag organization in Europe to do a joint press thing several weeks ago, saying we need to pump the brakes here and we need to be talking instead of starting a trade war with the EU.
I wanted to get, let me share my screen here again, John, and share with you an interview also yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, with Brooke Rollins, Secretary of Agriculture. And somebody just play this clip and get your response.
You use retail prices as opposed to import prices, and they make a compelling case. I'd ask you to check it out. The reason I ask you
I have
is because,
not read.
Yeah, well, I'd ask you to check it out. You should read it. The reason I ask is because a lot of people are questioning the level of scholarship here behind how these tariffs were done. For example, President Trump laid out with a giant graphic of all the countries where tariffs were going to be, what he called reciprocal tariffs were going to be imposed. And you're imposing a 10% tariff on the herd in McDonald Islands. The herd in McDonald Islands have 0 human inhabitants. They have 0 exports. They have 0 imports. They do have a lot of penguins. Why are you putting import tariffs on islands that are entirely populated by penguins?
Well, I mean, come on, Jake. Obviously, here's the bottom line. We live under a tariff regime from other countries. We have too long
the McDonald Islands is not imposing
the idea that America goes first. I mean, come on. Whatever. Listen, the people that are leading this are serious, intentional, patriotic, the smartest people I've ever worked with. I did not come up with the formulas. I'm the ag secretary. I studied agriculture at Texas A&M. I was in a lot of conversations to make sure our farmers and our ranchers were part of that. The president recognized the importance of inputs. We got potash and fertilizer to make sure they could do their planting. But I have no doubt that I speak on behalf of President Trump when he would say he has the utmost confidence in the team and what they have built and what they have put together. And we are unleashing a new golden age, and we will see an economy that will benefit not just every corner of America, but our farmers and our ranchers and the people that have been left behind for far too long by both Republicans and Democrats.
So, there are a lot of words there, but you've met a lot of agriculture secretaries, and she's pretty fresh on the job. But does that help explain? Does that give any comfort to the agriculture sector, the farmers and ranchers here in Nebraska that are scratching their heads and trying to figure out just what the hell is going on?
So the need to have a tariff schedule for every possible country in the world is being done to avoid what has happened last time, which was really poorly conceived and really poorly done in Trump 1.0 relative to China, and that is that China just and I was publicly quoted and took some heat from that. Was glad to do it. But I just said, you got to have a better plan than that, because all China's going to do is they have 101 ways to be able to launder and bring stuff in that they need, which they did, and they had 102 ways to be able to get it out, and they did. And so they completely went around our efforts because the president did not use all of the other trade partners that we have in the world in order to be able to have a more effective effort relative to being able to isolate China. And so maybe part of what was learned from all of that was that you've got to have a trade regime in place for all the countries of the world in order to avoid things like that happening. Why it is that you need one for a country that has no people, I do not know. That makes no sense at all. But I do think that there's problems with the basic formula that they're using based on what I've been able to see from that. I think that's a problem. And, this is to the extent that you really understand how things work, things that look more or less complicated. But here's one part that I think a lot of people are kind of scratching their heads and looking at. So here's Canada and Mexico. Who are these guys? Well, there are longstanding neighbors, right? So there are next door neighbors. There are two largest trading partners. So they're not just neighbors. There are two largest trading partners, and we do an awful lot of ag with both of them. And they're also, guess what, a part of the North American trading corridor that we developed when we developed NAFTA in 1993. And so our economies are purposely linked in order to be a trading bloc and trading corridor to compete against South America and EU and China and Southeast Asia and Africa and all of the major trading blocs in the world. So here you have these economies purposely intertwined and linked. And so from my perspective, having done this for a while, I look at this and say, anything that you do to Canada or Mexico because of that linkage, you are, whether you intend to do it or not, you are also going to do directly or indirectly to the U.S. So you shoot either one of those two countries in the foot, you better check your own boot for blood because it's going to be there. Because that's the way our economies are purposely linked. So for us to have the same kind of trade policy against Canada and Mexico as we do a whole bunch of other folks in the rest of the world does not make sense to me. What we've done to what the president has done is with our relationship with Canada is just treacherous. So here is one of the United States' very best, strongest, most consistent allies as well in the world community, and we've gone from being the trusted friend and neighbor to now the Canadians hate our guts, and they're going to the store and they're going shopping to make sure that the stuff that they bring home does not come from the U.S. 85%, we've been told, of all of the vacations that were booked from Canada to the United States have been canceled. The Canadian people are absolutely aghast with the way that they've been disrespected and treated. And this talk about making them into the 51st state is just condescending and is just uncalled for. So what you do and how you do it matters. And so at a point in history where the United States needs more friends and allies, what the president is doing in trade policy, the way that he's doing it, is to cause us to lose friends and allies at an unprecedented rate and in an unnecessary fashion.
And speaking of Canada, for our non-agriculture listeners and viewers, the Ag Secretary mentioned in that clip potash. And as I understand, Nebraska farmers get a lot of maybe all of their potash from Canada, right? So maybe in the last couple minutes we have here, John, I got one more question after this, but what is potash and why is it important to Nebraska farmers?
It's one of the things we use for agricultural fertilizers. And so we get about 80% of all we use from Canada. We get an awful lot of the lumber that we use from Canada. An awful lot of the paper that we use is owned by Canadian mills in the U.S. So when we talk about this linkage back and forth across the border, a lot of our raw material products that we get and that we use come from Canada. And so, you got to remember tariffs are a tax. And, let's be clear about who pays them. And so when you do that, you realize that we're also not only going to be having problems with access to these products, but we're going to be having problems paying for them. because we also use a lot of them. So when you raise tariffs, we're going to have a price impacting effect, even if you got rid of the volume of agricultural products. Because of tariffs, you're going to have to be reducing the total amount of value there in order to be able to make it cash flow in the marketplace because of what we're doing with tariffs. So we've made ourselves a much harder country to do business with. And, if I could just say, going back to what I think the president is doing, is when I started out in 1994 as a trade advisor, there's only one country in the world that I could think of that was using value-added taxes, and that was India. And so now most of the cool kids in the world and the bigger industrialized economies are using value-added taxes. And a lot of those are running about 18%. So the U.S. doesn't have value-added taxes. So there opens the door to the use of tariffs to try to offset a value-added tax. So that's part of what I think is intended to be going on. Whether or not that's really kind of the best way to get at that inequity is a completely separate issue. And again, proper use of the tool.
Last question, John, and I appreciate your time because I know you've got other reporters lined up to talk to you because you are an expert in this field here in Nebraska. Our congressional delegation, obviously the president has some latitude when it comes to trade policies. But a lot of people are suggesting not only on this issue, but with trade, but also with, lots of other things in the last 2 months that the president has done, that Congress has abdicated their role. What role does Congress have in continuing to shape our trade policy across the world? And what hope do you have that our Nebraska delegation is up for that challenge?
So going back to a lot of the changes in how we do trade policy. So I've been actively involved, not just at the state, but the national level, going back to 1990 when I signed up for this job. And so what Nebraska Farmers Union has been saying, what National Farmers Union has been saying, is that this is a constitutionally mandated authority and responsibility for Congress, and that Congress has no business involuntarily ceding away constitutionally mandated responsibilities. And it's a fundamental mistake in our democracy to concentrate that much power in the hands of any president. And that Congress should have never given away and ceded away its constitutionally mandated responsibilities. And so we've been saying that since the 90s. And we've also been saying the time will come when we do that, given who sits in the White House, we'll regret that. And so what I see is something that the Congress has full responsibility for. And do they need to step up, and do they need to reclaim their authority? Yes. And we're going to be urging them to do that. But hopefully, now that we see how this works, when you do that, we understand the logic of why it is that our forefathers had the good foresight to be able to look at the situation and say, this is clearly a responsibility of duly elected representative government to make these kinds of decisions together. Again, process matters.
Yeah. Well, John Hansen, president of the Nebraska Farmers Union, appreciate your time. Appreciate your insights. Appreciate your leadership. Thanks for spending a few moments here on the Dan Parsons Show to help our listeners and viewers kind of try to make sense out of this really confusing time.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your efforts. And when you said that I was a trade expert, I was reminded of my Norwegian grandfather's definition of an expert, which was the darn fool 50 miles away from home. And he said, in my case, it was always a matter of mileage. So you're welcome to what expertise I have, but I have been doing trade policy for a long time, and trade policy is economic policy and all those other things. And so we're now getting a crash course in how all of this hangs together, big picture.
Well, I certainly learned a lot about international trade. Thanks so much, John, for joining us today. This story is far from over. A few other thank yous to the people behind the scenes who make this project happen. Producer, Chase Porter. Penology Tech Solutions. Kim Remington, Parsons Public Relations Director of Operations. And most importantly, thanks to each of you for tuning in. We are building an amazing audience, and I'm so appreciative of each of you. Thank you very much. Well, that's the show. Now go do good things. I'm Dan Parsons.